Artificial intelligence is coming, whether we like it or not. AI will continue to develop and integrate into all aspects of life. And coming from a person who isn't a huge fan of AI and thinks it generally makes people more lazy and stupid, I don't deny that it has great potential and will progress into more aspects of life. But the question of where, why, and who progresses it does matter. I'm going to spend a lot of this video going over the pros and cons of AI data centers themselves, but there is more to the equation than just immediate factors. If the US wants to maintain status as a global military and financial hegemon, which provides many downstream benefits that most Americans wouldn't even realize until they're gone, we have to maintain the edge in AI. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If we don't push tech into the future due to short-term costs, somebody else will. And that's not a future most Americans would like to see, unless you legitimately want America to fail. Over the past few months, the topic of AI data centers have been hotly debated. Many businessmen and government officials understand the need for them and that they have to go somewhere. On the flip side, many members of the communities where these centers are applying to be built are pushing back due to potential issues like higher electricity costs and water usage. Now, to quickly touch on something I'll discuss more later, the US has completely failed to put the necessary investment for our power grid. AI data centers will add a lot of strain to our already struggling energy production, which is why I think energy is a national security emergency, as I talked about in a video a while back, specifically on our failure to develop nuclear energy. Solar, wind, hydroelectric, whatever renewables people want to push will not be able to meet future demands on their own. But between green tree huggers and fossil fuel lobbyists, insane regulations and lack of government support have made nuclear energy a completely worthless endeavor. Before getting more into that, let's look at things as they stand now. The immediate pros and cons of AI data center construction. It's much easier to start with the cons, as so many outlets and activists have made sure that we all know them for a while now. And there are two primary concerns: power and water, with minor concerns being noise, jobs, and just generally anti-AI sentiment. Starting with power, this is an issue that stems from 40 years of the federal government's failure to update and invest in the nation's electrical grid. And throughout the video, I'll repeatedly refer back to points I made in the video about nuclear energy and our failing power grid, but since we're looking at things as they stand now, it's hard to argue that as more and more data centers are built, costs won't go up. Energy production is finite, and basic principles of supply and demand are in play. However, there can be a balance. Most tech companies are willing to foot the bill for greater energy investment in the areas where their centers are being built. Utilities typically require developers to fund substations, transmission upgrades, or dedicated power lines at private expense, and those improvements are often transferred to the utility or local government, becoming long-term public infrastructure assets funded by private investment. Many states now are requiring large load customers to pay for its system expansions, attempting to shield residential customers from the costs, which is a fair way to protect the average consumer from bearing the cost of these centers, but it does get complicated when trying to separate normal cost increases from data center-driven price increases. Meta has matched 100% of its electricity consumption with clean and renewable energy since 2020. Microsoft has also vowed to match all the electricity it consumes with zero carbon energy purchases by 2030, signing a 5-year agreement to develop over 10.5 gigawatts of new renewable energy capacity in the US and Europe between 2026 and 2030, and Google, Intersect, and TPG Rise Climate announced a partnership in December 2024 to invest $20 billion by 2030 to co-locate gigawatts of data center capacity with solar and battery storage facilities. That being said, it's tough to say that non-state-owned utilities have not put any of the costs of these data centers onto residential consumers. Since they are privately owned, albeit highly regulated, we don't really know the justifications and nuances of their price increases. Another thing to note is that even in the past 5 years with AI data center construction, average retail energy prices have largely tracked with inflation. Price changes vary based on the state, where states with high risk of hurricanes, major storms, and wildfires have raised prices, as well as states with higher renewable energy investment. However, even as real energy prices have maintained a slightly downward trend, residents have experienced a larger share of cost increases than industrial counterparts, likely due to cost allocation decisions by utilities and their regulators. And that's an easier fix by regulators, simply saying that utility companies can't selectively choose who bears more of the cost. Cost increases have to be uniform unless they're directly attributable to someone, like data centers. All of this could have been so much more seamless if our grid infrastructure had been invested in, but the lack of maintenance leads to an offshoot of the power problem: more pollution from gas power plants. The lack of investment has utility companies scrambling to meet rising demands, and they have to resort to building fast and cheap forms of power production. Like any other combustion engine, combustion turbines emit plenty of pollutants that can harm local health. Elon Musk's XAI, for example, had to throw a bunch of polluting methane-powered generators at its data center in Memphis to ensure proper power supply. I get that people are concerned about the externalities of rapid construction, and we should be doing what we can to mitigate any problems, but we can't seriously hinder progress unless we want to copy Europe and fall behind the power curve. These externalities are going to have to be solved in conjunction with the expanding AI landscape. We're not going into this completely blind though. Engineers do have ideas to help spread the load that data centers require, and the more infrastructure we build, the easier that distribution can be. While achieving uniform environmental impact for AI data centers across all geographical locations is challenging, as some regions inherently face greater environmental disadvantages than others, the ability to flexibly manage AI computing across a network of geographically distributed data centers offers opportunities to lessen the impacts of disadvantaged regions and spread out any negative impact. This geographical load balancing to spatially reroute AI traffic is easy and immediately manageable. This technique enables redistribution of AI computing across data centers, considering real-time local factors such as energy sources and water efficiency. The other problem, and I'd say probably the more important one to consider, is the amount of water usage that these new, larger data centers require. AI data centers require a lot of water for cooling, ranging from 1 to 5 million gallons per day. Although less water-intensive technologies are available, most data centers still rely on inefficient evaporative cooling. The reason is that water is generally cheaper than electricity, and companies are going to use more of the cheaper option. If we had greater energy supply, and therefore cheaper energy, then data centers might be able to rely on waterless systems like basic forced air or dry cooling loops. Also, as the need grows, we could see waterless concepts like liquid immersion become more common. Currently, the non-conductive synthetic fluid is more expensive, but like anything else, demand grows supply, and supply makes things less expensive. I get that many parts of the country are concerned over droughts and lower water tables already, especially in the historically drier regions. However, water use in the United States in 2015 was estimated to be about 322 billion gallons per day, mostly used in agriculture, industry, and energy production. I mentioned that AI data centers use 1 to 5 million gallons per day. That's a drop in the bucket of overall water usage. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't aim to maximize each gallon of water used, become more efficient, or care about people's quality of life, but it doesn't mean that we have to be holistically considerate of what's really causing these problems. And it's not like there aren't avenues to solve some of these problems. Again, going back to my repetitive point about lack of investment. While more investment into tech will bring innovation on the resource efficiency side, I'm continually surprised at the US's lack of investment in things like desalination plants. Granted, that at least partially stems from a lack of investment in energy, since desalination plants take a lot of power, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for the western US to rely so heavily on volatile things like snow runoff for their water supplies. What if there's a dry winter like this last one? Places like California and Arizona get less than 1% of their water supply from desalination, yet California has a whole lot of coastline and always seems to be concerned about going through a drought. Arizona uses around 300 million gallons of water daily. A single desalination plant can produce between 25 and 50 million gallons per day, which would cover 10 to 18% of their daily total. Obviously, Arizona is not on the coast, but we have these things called pipelines. If you don't think that's feasible, the Saudi Arabian Saline Water Conversion Corporation has a desalination system that contains 9,000 miles of pipelines and has a capacity of 5 billion gallons of water daily. If they can do it, we sure can too. It doesn't help when activists like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will push narratives like AI data centers making the water brown, covering anti-big tech into pseudo-environmentalism. But the problem is just a matter of construction. When you churn up sediment in the process of laying structural foundations, some sediment will wash into nearby water supplies. If those water supplies don't have any way to filter out the sediment, then the sediment will get into the water. Construction projects can also temporarily turn off water supplies, and then in the process of turning them back on, stir up sediment already in the pipes. But that's true for any large construction project, not just data centers, and will go away over time when the groundwater pathways settle down or the stirred up sediment is flushed out. Truth still matters, and it's a problem when you're so hyper anti-big business that you just lie and misattribute problems to them. You can call out bad things without over-exaggerating and fear-mongering. Data centers don't make the water dirty, they just currently use a lot of it. For the two minor debates, jobs and noise, there are a few things that matter. First, some will say that data centers create jobs and stimulate the economy of an area, and that is true during construction. But data centers of any kind don't require many workers once it's operational. It's a pretty simple, self-contained system. So temporarily, these projects will create jobs, but once the center is built, most of the jobs go away. However, the tax revenue does not, and states can pull in a lot of taxes. Loudoun County, Virginia, known as the data center capital, gains $890 million annually from the tech industry, nearly matching the county's operating budget. So that is another factor to consider when weighing options. The other concern was noise pollution, and I know that it would be pretty annoying to essentially have a busy highway built close to your house, but that being said, in many cases it once again comes back to our energy problem, because for a lot of these data centers the noise does not come from the data center, it comes from the on-site generators helping out the power supply. Since we can't fix the energy issue overnight, I don't think it would be unreasonable to require data centers to have some sort of sound barriers or sound reduction techniques to make the least negative impact to the surrounding community. But at the end of the day, while we can do our best to mitigate these problems, I don't think that they're enough to take ourselves out of the AI race. I think that covers the general complaints surrounding AI data centers, so let's look at why AI development is ultimately necessary, even coming from a guy that doesn't really like it. Three main streams come to mind: economic productivity, personal convenience, and national security. AI is transforming the economy. It's changing what consumers demand and how firms make their goods and services available. And a lot of people are worried about the job market in the face of a creation that can automate simple tasks with unseen efficiency. But it's almost like that's happened numerous times before. Scribes adapted just fine after the invention of the printing press, coachmen and horse-drawn carriages adapted fine after the invention of the steam engine, iron workers adapted after steel came around. Every time a major technological advancement is developed, new jobs that we'd never imagined pop up, and the old jobs either fade away or evolve. That's how society works. Take software engineering, an industry seen as in the crosshairs of AI. We know that AI isn't perfect and may never be, so we still need real people who know what they're doing to supervise and check AI output. Maybe that won't require as many people, but then you have the other side of the equation. AI cannot create, it can only synthesize what already exists. So the number of people brought on to help push software forward versus just sitting out typing out lines of mundane code could increase. Now the question of automation versus augmentation remains. Whether AI will automate people out of their jobs or just augment their work to be more productive is a question that we still don't have the answer to. And just how much AI will add to the economy depends on a range of factors, and could go in many directions. But this video isn't meant to be an in-depth look into the positives and negatives of AI as a whole, so I'll digress on that point, but you get the picture and can extrapolate those ideas across pretty much any industry. With the right direction, AI can make people's lives easier and more efficient. This is obvious. Being able to have a bunch of information synthesized and simplified in seconds is very beneficial, even if I don't think that people check what AI is telling them often enough. But it does have promising outlooks in professional sectors like finance, real estate, and even health. However, because AI is only a few years old, general integration is still slow, so the extent of AI integration over time is speculative. But I think it's safe to say that as AI improves, more and more mundane tasks, even for the average person, will be automated, freeing up more time for people to focus on other things. The biggest reason why building AI data centers is necessary now has nothing to do with personal convenience and is indirectly economic, and that reason is national security. Some people might say military superiority, but I think it's more than that. Yes, the US does have to maintain its AI edge over our adversaries, and yes, that adversary is obviously China. But it's not just a matter of developing better AI targeting systems, cyber warfare systems, or futuristic AI robot soldiers. It's also about hegemonic influence globally. Everybody is going to want more AI in their countries. It is productive and convenient, as I talked about. So while we need to be ahead of the curve pushing AI forward to ensure domestic productivity and military lethality, we also need to create the best AI systems so nations around the world come to us to invest in their AI integration. If we drop the ball or slow down our efforts to improve AI because of short-term, fixable problems, we put that investment at risk. China will not slow down. The CCP does not care about pollution. Clearly, they're the undisputed leaders in it. They want to be top dog, and I get that. If Americans hinder our own technological progress, that could very well happen. And most people don't realize just how big of a deal that actually is. So much of our economy and economic benefits the average person doesn't see is tied to our hegemony and the dollar being held as a world reserve currency. China already digs their claws into many developing countries via their Belt and Road Initiative. If all of these mainly African nations go to China for AI and tech, it gives China more authoritative control over resource-rich nations and gives the yuan more leverage over the dollar. The Trump administration has already fumbled a few things that made our own allies turn towards or threaten to turn towards China as a larger economic partner. Do I see any of them actually choosing China over the US as their primary trading partner? Probably not, but if China gaps us in the tech race, they may not have a choice. People want the best and newest things, no matter where they're coming from, which means that we have to make sure the best and newest things are coming out of the US. Does that come with trade-offs? For sure, but those trade-offs I've described are fixable if we make up for the lack of past investment and prioritize tech as a national security issue. All aspects of tech, including the inputs and infrastructure, not just a single-scale creation in a laboratory. The reality is that no technological evolution is perfect. There are going to be immediate trade-offs. Every period of change has had them, but we have consistently accepted short-term growing pains for long-term productivity gains, and each time we come out way ahead of where we were before. All the problems people against data centers point to are fixable. And like everything else, the more you do something, the better you get, the more efficient that thing becomes, and the better the surrounding technology gets. That doesn't mean that we should mindlessly throw massive data centers everywhere without considering the different factors I've talked about. We can do these things intelligently while making sure that we create the necessary capacity for these businesses to keep America in its role as the leading developer of future technologies. That is a must. Thank you for watching. Let me know how you think we should be handling these new technologies. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.